Hi, this is Kendra from Pencil and Pigment, and today I wanted to talk about homemade gesso. I have made two different types of gesso here, and the reason is because I am doing a no-buy art supply, and my gesso expired. It went bad. It was 20 years old. So I found the two easiest recipes, and I'll put these in the description box. I'll also link recipes I didn't use. These were the only two I could use because under my rules, I can't buy additional kitchen ingredients to make for art supplies. So the recipes that called for talc powder, chalk, marble dust, plaster of Paris, Mod Podge, or drywall joint compound aren't recipes that I could use because I don't already own those supplies. These are the things I own. This is what I was able to create. Now the glue I use is my glue, and you can tell it's mine because the label's still on it. And for anybody with kids, yeah. So here's my glue, and here is the acrylic paint I used. I used the Liquitex Professional Heavy Body. As you can see, I don't have much left. So what I'm hoping for with this recipe is that this one that doesn't call for any paint, that's super quick and easy to make, is effective and usable, because I purchased a bunch of sketchbooks that I want the backup option of being able to paint in them if I so choose, if I change my mind about their general purpose. Now I have gessoed a sheet of Strathmore 400 Tone Tan. This is the drawing paper. This is the 118 gram. Now they make other sketchbooks. Ideally, they make a mixed media. This one is 190 grams. I have a video as to why you want to go by grams over pounds. I'll link that. I know of an artist and creator that uses the Moleskin art sketchbook. This isn't even their watercolor one. It's just their art sketchbook. And this one is 165 grams. I'll link a video of an oil painter that gessos and then oil paints, because that is absolutely fascinating to watch and see how, if you are on a budget or due to size constraints and can't have tons of canvases around, oil painting in a sketchbook is an option that you can do. For this, I wanted to use a thinner paper because if it works well on thin paper, it's going to work on thick paper. I also gessoed some paper from my Kyoto offset little sketchbooks I have. I have a ton of these, and while I have watercolored in them, I wanted to see if maybe I could gesso and then paint. So I'll link the demo I did of that sketchbook too. But let's go in and see what we have to see here. And for those of you wondering about acrylic painting or gouache painting, I'm going to go in at 100%, and I'm just going to do a couple lines and see how this looks, and then I'm going to slowly thin it out and see how that looks. I can definitely tell you the difference. The one with the acrylic paint and the baking soda is thick and scratchy. Very thin, very smooth. This layer is seamless with the paper. It feels like almost there's nothing on it. This one is raised and elevated. Now that can be an added bonus to your art. You can watercolor over gesso, and there are a bunch of reasons why that would be something you'd want to try. Now this is very smooth on here, so streaking could be an issue. This is very texturized, which could add a level of fun. Now I'm going to kind of water this down a bit. Let's see here. It's definitely more streaky on the thinner gesso. And then we'll flip it over and see. And it definitely gets more transparent on the thinner gesso layer faster. So I'm thinning it out at the same, but the white shows through. So The back is fine, like nothing's happened. Nothing's happened. I'm going to let this dry. I'll add a pinned comment if something gets weird or starts to change or looks different. Let's do it just on the regular sheet in the middle. And maybe you can acrylic right on here. I don't know. I've never just straight up acrylic on regular drawing paper before. There's no rule that says you can't. I just think when you go to thin it out, the warping and maybe the absorbency is going to be an issue. Now, if you want to turn any sketchbook into a watercolor sketchbook, you have a couple options. You can either gesso, and gessoing for watercolor, why you would want to do that would be if you're drawing something and you're not sure, or you haven't sort of built the creative confidence to lay something down once, it's easier to wipe off your watercolor if you watercolor on top of a gesso layer. Also, when you put your layer of gesso on, you could stamp it or scrub it or put it on with weird texture, and that could be an added layer of depth and dimension for your watercolor to go on top of. So if you want to just gesso a tiny portion and then put sort of streaks and striations in it and then paint a cat over it, that would look really, really cool. If you've painted something you don't like, you can gesso over it and watercolor again. You can tint your gesso. What you would want to do with this though is you would want to make sure that your watercolor, there's no particles in it, it's in its sort of pan or pot and it's all thinned out, and then you would slowly add the gesso to the watercolor to tint that if you wanted to sort of create your own colored substrate background paper. Or if you want to have gesso of different thicknesses and heights for added depth and dimension, that's something else you can do with watercolor. But if you want to turn a watercolor or just any sketchbook into a sketchbook you can watercolor in, you need two products. You need something called sizing liquid. Holbein makes a nice one. It looks kind of white. You would want to do a even coat of that across the paper. And what that does is reduce paper absorbency. So you can paint and mix and it doesn't soak through like trying to print on printer paper. And then you would want to add, after that dries absolutely completely, a layer of watercolor ground, which is another liquid. And Daniel Smith makes my favorites because they come in tons of fun colors. And that's something else you would want to put on top of the sizing liquid and let dry completely. And then you can watercolor in any sketchbook you want. So, hypothetically, if you weren't doing a no-buy but had a ton of sketchbooks and decided you wanted to watercolor in all of them, you could buy those two liquid products and then really, really go for it. You can see right here, where this paper hasn't had any treatment, that the absorbency is strange. Now I'm going to try and flip this over. And you can see. So it's soaked through where there was no gesso, and we have a tiny bit here. So here where I went heavy, this actually soaked through, which is very interesting to me. It tells me that this paper could use a sizing liquid for the gesso layer, which I don't own that. So I'm actually leaning towards the simpler one, and it could be that the larger portion of glue is adding a stronger layer. I'm not sure, because this is 1 part glue, 3 water, 3 cornstarch, 3 baking soda, and acrylic paint. Let's just add water and see if we can we get so wet on here that it seeps through. That hardly seems fair, but let's just put it to the test since we're here, you know? And again, if you have a thicker paper that's more mixed media, obviously that would be a better option. I just want to show you normal typical paper in case you want to add watercolor or painting elements to your pieces, and all you have is 118 gram paper. So let's kind of look and see if this is, I'm not seeing any bleed through. So let's add some water to this one. And we're getting towards the end where it's not as thick. And we'll just let that sit. And I'll pin a comment after this dries talking about what I've noticed with these gessos. But so far I actually like B a little bit better, and it was easier to make. It's also a little thinner because of glue and water. It's more liquidy than this mix, but I like this one better. So I hope this helped. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.